What's up, Squadron? Aviation has given me a ton of amazing experiences.
Good job there. Nice rock, high wing.
But more importantly, it's introduced me to a whole new family of friends.
Like, dude, you're killing it. You're having a great day.
So just never give up.
Airport, and then, oh, by the way, I got carb ice while I was flying through, so the engine started running rough, and I had to
Join us tonight as we're cleared direct for some hangar flying. I am Bryon Bowman, and this is SuperAero Live.
How's a lot? How's a lot of cookies? What's up, Av Geeks? It's Wednesday, which can only mean one thing. It's time, you guessed it, for another episode of SuperAero Live. Sorry about your ears there. I saw the red on the EQ. I do that every week. It's like I should get a sound mixer person. I should get a sound mixer person to mix the sound on my little doobly-doos so I can yell as loud as I want. Anyway, thanks for your patience as we got the show up and running this week. I had a 3-year-old that didn't want to go to sleep. So, yeah, just a little insight into my life. We put, like, my dad used to give me blackberry brandy to go to bed when I was a kid. I can't do that. I feel like that's not allowed anymore. But anyway, we got her loaded up on melatonin. We'll see if that works. Anyway, thanks for coming out, everyone in the chat. I see Brian Garrett's in the chat. Has something about making a Costco run. Yeah, let's call it that. We're gonna talk to him more in a little bit. Krueger's here. Towler's here. Wolf Pilot's back. Haven't seen you in a while, buddy. Gabriel Muller's here. Great to see you. 72 Papa wants his refund. Well, you can have it. Just send me a self-addressed stamped envelope to. I'll put a P.O. box in the thing. You can send me a self-addressed stamped an SASE. Nathan Ballard is here. Just Plain Silly is here. One of the things about our guest tonight, I started talking to everyone. Everyone's like, "Oh, I know that guy. He is amazing." And I didn't know he was so connected. So connected with everything. Father-daughter flights is here. Glenn Towler, did I say your name already? Maybe I did. James Hyatt. Maine Marin? Wow. I think that's a new name. That's a cool name. Man, so many people in the chat tonight. Brian Turner's trying to just refresh the page to get that going. Gary Smith. You guys are complaining, but I love you all. Thank you for your patience as we get this all right. Whoa, I just had a stroke, I think, on air. Okay, boom. So here's the thing, guys. Tonight's guest, super cool dude. I actually met him at Oshkosh last year, and the funny part of that, the admission I will say, is I forgot because I maybe had been drinking a little bit, and also there were tornadoes that night. So, but supporter of the show, which is really great, and we do this Patreon thing after the show where we all go on Zoom together and just hang out till way too late at night, and he was talking to us about his sling build, and it was so interesting, and I was like, you know what, we gotta have you on the show, man. Turns out, lots of cool adventures. I'm gonna bring him on the screen now. You've waited long enough. Where is he? Brian Garrett's here. What's up, man?
Hey. Nothing much.
Well, I'm
just spending the time inside since it's I think it's like 3 degrees outside.
This is the thing. So we live in it's 18 degrees where I'm at right now. I just pulled it up, and that feels warm to me. So I get it. I understand.
Yeah, but it's a dry cold here.
It's drier by you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably hear the whole house humidifier going into the other side of the basement. We just had a funny little side story. Going to be in at Outlaw Stole in Arizona, and all the folks that run National Stole are from Texas and Florida, and they were sending me the weather forecast, complaining that it was going to be in the high 60s, low 70s this weekend in Arizona. And I sent them a picture of my backyard. I said, everything is covered in ice.
Yep.
The school is shut down because of ice. I'm excited. I'll be wearing shorts, and they're all going to be bundled up. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, I'll take 60 degrees anytime.
Holy moly, for real. Hey, so you. A lot of people know you.
I'm not really sure how that happened. I mean, I sort of insert myself into some conversations, I guess.
No, it's just interesting because I was like, hey, look, like I've got Bryon on the show tonight, and I started getting all these text messages like, whoa, like I'm so excited you have Bryon on the show tonight. He's got builder, he's got Colorado mountain flying things, all these crazy things that we've never even talked about. It's just super cool that like you've got all these little pieces, the way aviation works, the way the network of it's a small world type thing going on. I love it. It's pretty cool. So we got to start at the beginning. We always ask every week, like, talk to me about how you found this crazy passion.
Well, the funny thing is you sort of have to insert it in the later part of my life.
Okay.
When my very first time ever flying was a little infant. My dad was a private pilot, and I still have his logbook around here. And in the logbook, you can see it's like, okay, he actually went flying the day after I was born. I think that was probably a currency flight because he was planning on taking some trips with me and my mom someplace, to take me over to the grandparents and the relatives and things like that. But with like most people's stories, family gets in the way and life just kind of goes on and you never return back to aviation. So I have no memory whatsoever of him ever flying or flying with him. And I mean, that's probably before he even got married to my mom. So fast forward a whole number of years, I get married, and I never really considered much about flying, simply because I figured the math was too hard or something along those lines.
I mean, let's be real, the math is hard.
Oh gosh. Yeah. It's like, give me my electronic E6B.
Yeah.
So one day I'm out at dinner with my wife and her family, and we're at the Outback, and I remember specifically there was a flying magazine sitting in the waiting area, and there's a big old jet sitting on the front, and I kind of looked at that and went, I think I can do that. And I sat around, thinking about it for a little while, and then talked to my wife and said, I think this is something I should, or we can do. And we sat down, we kind of laid out a plan and figured it out. And the funny part was I was concerned that I wasn't going to pass the medical. And the sport pilot license had come out recently, and I was sort of like, well, I can do the sport pilot's license, and that's inexpensive to fly. There's no such thing as inexpensive to fly. So I went after the sport pilot's license because you just need a driver's license for it, and got that and started learning more about flying, and it just kind of grew out of that. The progression was kind of funny because when we got our very first fly-in that my wife and I went on, we just totally got hooked on it. And if anybody out there is trying to find a purpose for flying, getting plugged into flying clubs where they go places and visit, events and things like that,
Sure.
the community is amazing. So we planned to fly into Fredericksburg, Texas, and from Colorado in a light sport airplane, it's about 7.5 hours. And so we get in the airplane and we fly down there, and it's 3 hops. We're doing maybe 100 knots the whole way. It's a little bit slower than a 172. And we pull up to the Hangar Hotel down there, which you have one of the pictures.
Yeah. Let me pull it up.
There. And we, it's a long flight, and it's a bubble canopy the whole way. So we're in the sun, and we pull up and we check in, and we head up to there's a deck up on the second level that overlooks the ramp area. And there's this old salty pilot. He's a Southern boy, and he's flying a Mooney down there, and he's leans back in his chair, cracks open a beer, leans back, knocks it back, and goes, "God, I can't believe it took me 3 hours to get it down here today." At which point in time, my wife just about backhanded me. Wait, we can go faster than this? So I said, yeah, I need a private pilot's license. So I go on my way and get my private pilot's license.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah,
There's
that's
the Hangar Hotel.
Yep. And I have to say, my wife's been amazingly supportive of this crazy hobby. So we go on all sorts of different adventures, and we've had some really amazing experiences with the local flying. We're part of the Colorado Pilots Association. So get my private pilot's license, and one day we're going on a fly-in, and we go out to the airport, and the ceilings are 900 feet. Well, we're not going anywhere. So we sit there for 2 or 3 hours, and it's like, well, how do we fix this so that we can go on something like this? It's like, well, I need my instrument rating. Okay, so I, get my permission to now go get my instrument rating. And after you get your instrument rating, it's sort of like, well, might as well get the commercial. So I finished that up almost a couple years ago. So that's sort of the progression in it, and it's just been kind of evolving way beyond anything that I ever expected to do by this point in time.
I think everyone at home who has a partner should be taking notes about how that worked. That maybe I just need to take my family on more adventures, and then you get clouded out, or you get whatever. Then it's like, okay, let's just keep adding to the capability. Brian Turner's another good example of that, right? If we upgrade to this big, fancy, fast airplane, then we can all go.
Yeah, so and the fly-ins are... We've gone to some towns where you'd be like, why would you go there?
Yeah.
One of the photos is actually... I'm on final for Ellsworth Air Force Base.
Oh, I think I saw that in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's a military Air Force base. A number of years ago, they used to allow general aviation to fly in for big air shows. And you had to get a time slot, and you had 100% had to be off the field by the end of the day. If you have to take the wings off and truck it out, it's got to be off the airport. So we were able to fly into an Air Force base, and there's a few pictures of us just kind of, that's it right there. And that was a very unique experience. But we've done things where we've gone to little towns in Iowa and Kansas, and there was one event that we went to where we had a woman speak to us who... There was a DJ that did a whole bunch of research on 9/11 and all the air traffic that was in the air. And the woman that was the presenter there, as near as they can tell, was the last airplane in the sky in the United States on 9/11.
Okay.
And got to hear her story firsthand.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really amazing. They were really getting close to shooting her down, because she wasn't talking to air traffic control, and she was ferrying an airplane that was still registered under an aerobatic name. And they didn't know where she was going, and oddly enough, her direction was headed towards Omaha, which, if you remember the day, for those of us that remember that,
right,
that's where Bush was heading. So they didn't know what the intentions were of this person. And, she calls up for weather, and airport's closed. That's weird. Calls up the next airport. Airport's closed. Well, that's weird. So it calls up ATC, and they're like, we're trying to land. Why are these airports closed? That's when she finds out that, 9/11 was going on. So it's just those really unique experiences that just add a whole different flavor to the aviation. And of course, Oshkosh is just a whole nother experience all on its own.
Well, I want to add a little bit about the flyout thing. I mean, I think that is super critical. I have like a little local group of pilots that we all have a Facebook group and stuff, and one pilot in the group, Brad, to his credit, Brad, if you're watching, thank you for this. Like, always like, hey guys, when are we going to Bolingbrook in Chicago? When are we going up to Green Bay again? Even just like shorter hops, right? All getting us together. Obviously, the pandemic put like a kind of shrink that down for a little bit, but now we're hoping to like expand that, get that going again. Those memories for folks who aren't doing that yet, like the same way you're experiencing and kind of reliving some of them right now on the show, like those are my most vivid memories of aviation, is like flying with like a group of people to a place, experiencing something, finding that little hole in the wall pizza joint or whatever that you never would literally in your life have gone to if you didn't land at an airport and go, oh, where can we get some pizza, right? Like, all that stuff.
And then you do crazy things where, like, we have a little airport that's up in the mountains, Buena Vista, which from Denver, it's a 3-hour drive. So you got to go around the mountains, and the highway doesn't go really directly by there. But from Denver, it's 45 minutes. Very easy mountain flight. The highest you got to get is maybe 11.5 or so. Retired air traffic controller works at the airport. Now it's non-towered. So as you're getting close, you call up for weather. You get the weather. Okay, which runway we're going to land on. And then you call up traffic and you say, Buena Vista traffic, inbound for landing runway 30 or whatever it is. And he picks up the radio and calls back and gives you a full weather report back and asks if you need the courtesy car or any services. And I pulled up there more than once where I've requested the courtesy car. I've landed. He flags me down, ties the airplane down. The car's sitting there running with the doors open, waiting for us to get into it and depart. And I take the passengers that are coming with me. They get out. We get in the car and they look around like, what just happened? Because we're driving into town. And they're trying to figure out, well, I didn't sign for anything. I didn't give my name or number. So how does that work? And I said, well, I just left him a couple $100,000 airplane. We're driving this beat up old car. We'll be back.
Yeah. It's funny. I never thought of it that way. Like the collateral of the plane versus the car. Like, of course.
Right.
Is that maybe a little embarrassing? Okay.
Well, it depends on the airplane you're flying, I guess.
Well, that's true. You sent me some other good photos. This is more adventures with the fam.
So Raton is just to the south of Colorado. There's a little pass you have to cross over. You can order a hamburger in the pattern, and it'll be ready for you to go when you get to the terminal there.
Okay, another bucket list. Okay, I got to go to the hotel place. I got to go to Raton.
And it's a good hamburger. They've got these nice recliners inside. It's kind of a neat little place. That's my wife's photo, and that's my solo flight. It was in a Vector Sports Star, which, of course, unfortunately didn't last long.
Is that? Are we gonna? Oh, whoa, Nathan Ballard.
It wasn't me.
I'm sorry,
okay.
One more time? Oh, I was just saying Nathan Ballard in the chat, dude. Best weekly aviation live stream. No,
wow.
Nathan, best weekly guy live stream. Nate, that was very generous, Nathan.
Thanks, Nathan.
By the way, I don't know if it still stands. He's threatened in the chat before, if you're in his area, free BFRs because he's an instructor.
Oh, so where's he at?
You're Georgia, right? You're Atlanta, Nathan?
It's a little far for me.
Well, but make a trip out of it. What you were just talking about doing trips.
When the sun's done, it'll be within a day.
Yeah, boom, over there, get your BFR from dude. Nathan, thank you so much for that. Okay, sorry. You were talking about that interrupted your solo. I want to hear more about this first solo in that aircraft. Anything highlight?
That wasn't the one I think you're talking about. This is
that's next.
Just a regular solo. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a slow learner, which is, kind of explains the math issues. And just took me a long time to get the solo. So when people on Reddit and all of the other forums out there are like, oh gosh, I haven't soloed and, I've got, 80, 90 hours. I'm just like, don't even talk to me. I'm well beyond that.
No, it's funny. You see that in all the like student pilot Facebooks and everything. And I'm always in there going like, it's not a race.
Yeah.
It's not a race.
In retrospect, I probably could have done it a little bit sooner, and I kind of feel like maybe my instructor was probably like, this guy's going to keep paying. So, but you learn.
Do have to look out for that. I mean, it's funny, right? In those same Facebook chats, you'll see someone who's like, I have blank hours. Is this bad? And then there's like the person who's being a jerk, and then everyone else is like, no, like just do you, man. We all learn at different speeds. Depends on your age and how much time you have and how much funding is constant or whatever. And
consistency. It's all.
Yeah. But then every once in a while, there's someone who's like, I haven't soloed in like 150 hours, and it's like, get a new instructor.
Yeah.
Someone should be, or at least have someone else fly with someone else to make sure. Like, that happens every once in a while. But that's not what we're here for tonight. We're here to talk about. So the next photos I have is an adventure, I think. So you were flying this plane, probably not this flight.
I was. No, it wasn't. And I do have kind of a funny story along the lines of photographing during that event.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we were coming back from Oshkosh on that one.
Nice Oakleys.
Thanks.
Go. So
if you look real closely off the leading edge of the wing there, that's Mount Rushmore.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the park. The parking lot's easy to see.
Wait
Mount
here.
Rushmore is really
we'll do this live.
There you go.
We'll do this live on how far can we enhance?
Yeah.
It's this
like
part.
Blade Runner, enhance.
It's the chunk above the red wavy bit.
Go to the left. There you go.
Oh,
See
there
the
they are.
right?
There
Yep.
they are. Hello, chaps.
Yep.
I was looking at the wrong blob. There we go. Let's enhance it some more. Oh, it's gone. It just went away. Oh, the whole thing went away.
That's as far as you can take it.
That's bad because I need that back to take more photos. All right, cool live stream software. Oh wait, there we go. I fixed it. All right, everything's fine. Except I gotta de-enhance it so we can talk about the next adventure. So talk to me about the plane you're in.
So that because my initial rating was a sport pilot's license. In 2008 to 2010, there weren't a lot of them available, and the A&P for the school that I learned through owned this Sting Sport, and it's a pretty sharp looking airplane.
Story.
Yeah,
kind of gave it away.
I didn't give you too many of them in this condition. So he had a quarter share for sale, and we purchased a quarter share because we didn't really want to rent. And as most people know, the overnight rents, or it's like if you take it for 2 or 3 days, there's a ground lease, or you have minimum hours per day that you have to use it. So this allowed us to take it for trips and things like that. So what you're looking here is the very abrupt ending of my private pilot check ride. If you're ever going to have an engine out procedure that you have to execute, have a DPE with you. Just makes it a whole lot easier. So what happened here is, we'd already done all of our short field and soft field takeoffs back at the airport, and we got up in the air, and the DPE had never flown it before, so he wanted to try it out for a little bit, and he kind of did some
Makes sense.
A few things with it just to kind of get a feeling for it. And we broke off of our cross country when we took off to go do that, and we were just entering into our first series of maneuvers and steep turns. So we were about a third of the way into the steep turn, and the entire airplane just started vibrating very, like, what is going on? It's like you're driving down a dirt road with the ridges in it. And my hand was already in the throttle, and I pulled the throttle back, immediately broke out of the maneuver. And at that point in time, the entire thing was over. What had happened was, we didn't know this until we got on the ground. There's a three-bladed prop. The first prop completely departed the shaft. It was a failure of the prop itself. And if you look in the shaft that's on the left hand side there, it's clean as a whistle. The bolts are still there to hold the blade in, but there's the prop had left the spinner. So as that prop left, the next blade was coming around, snapped that prop off at the base, at which point in time the entire thing is so off center that it just, vibrating around. And that's a Rotax 912 carbureted engine. And the way those work is the carburetors actually vibrate off the engine if there's enough of a vibration of the engine. So it wasn't a matter of me turning the engine off. It's that just the engine was no longer getting any fuel. At that point in time, we're clearly in an emergency situation. We're a couple thousand feet up from the ground. And one of the things, I probably learned more in that 2,000 feet than I think I've learned in any lesson, because you can practice emergency out procedures all day long, but you have no idea how fast you execute them, especially at 2,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And knowing your equipment is really critical. In that particular airplane, the radio had an EC button. I knew it meant emergency channel. I'd never pressed it because I didn't know what it did until this moment. So I pressed EC, did my mayday, and then realized that I was still on the frequency from the airport that we left from. The 121.5 was in the standby position, and that's what the EC button did. So I'd already gone to 7,700, flipped the frequency to 121.5, so it was in the active position. Made my call, and it was like as soon as you took your finger off the button, ATC was there. I mean, it was almost like they were waiting for us. So we made our communication, how many souls on board, where we were located. And, fortunately this is late September. We're right over a freshly plowed field. And it's like, okay, well, this is where we're landing. We were just north of Longmont. And I did look across Longmont to where the airport was at, but I would have had to glide over the city. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. I did have a parachute on board, but I was still flying. So no real need to pull that. The one tip I do have, it's probably better to pull the chute from an insurance perspective. Because once you have this type of an incident, the airplane almost becomes worthless on the aftermarket anyway. Because when we sold the plane, we took a bath on it. We got it all fixed. It was back to airworthiness, but nobody would bite on it for, what a normal retail version would go for. So that's the only advice I have on the parachute. But we're over the field, and we're circling the approach end of the field. There's power lines. And I was ready to make a run for the field. because I didn't want to have to make an over-under decision for the power lines. And the DP's like, no, do one more. Okay, cool, not a problem. So we come around and we're still well over them. And I have this kind of bad tendency that in some stressful situations, I get really sarcastic. So I turned to the DP and I was like, so soft field landing? And he's like, yes, please. So we came in and it was amazing. It was 100 feet. That was the total roll. And, soft field landing, I hit it all the way back. Mains hit, the front end slams down, but we, didn't flip or anything like that. The really interesting part, this is one of my favorite parts. So I need to find out where I'm at. I mean, I gave ATC a rough idea of where I was at, but I now need to let the fire department, the police department know where we're at. So I walk over to the farmhouse that we're very close by. I knock on the door and I said, hey, where am I? And they looked at me like, what do you mean, where are you? How'd you get here? And I said, well, I lost our engine and our airplane's in the field back behind. And they said, well, we didn't hear an airplane. You're catching on. So again, this is late September. We're in between two plowed fields. Corn's 6-7 feet tall. And you can see the tops of the fire engine going up and down the street. I had to walk out and flag down the fire department because they're looking for a smoldering pile of airplane in a field somewhere. And I go out and flag them down and they drive back. And one of the photos you have there is the one you see where, emergency equipment had shown up. And they were all kind of like, wow, this is not usually how we get to these scenarios. Another pro tip that I learned as part of this, as good as my intentions were to let my wife know what happened and not to be worried, that doesn't work. I said, look, I'm super busy right now. Everybody wants to talk to me. I'm okay. Don't come up. I'm totally fine. And about 20 minutes later, she's, where the hell are you? And I'm like, well, where are you? And she was she was a couple miles away. So she was really mad. And I get it. But it was interesting because ATCs want to talk to you on the phone. The NTSB's all of a sudden on the phone. So there's a lot of people wanting to talk to you pretty quickly, especially because you're there. And it was Labor Day weekend. So at that point in time, what we did was the partner who's the MP, we came in and we took the planes off. We left the airplane in the field over the weekend, and then we called a tow truck on like that Tuesday, so we didn't pay holiday rates. And then they came out and towed the airplane back to the airport without the wings. The funny anecdote to that is I had a great spot in the back of that plane for a video camera. And I almost always recorded my flights just because, it's things to record. A buddy of mine was going scuba diving the week leading up to that. And it was a camera that doubled as for scuba diving. And I said, yeah, sure, you can totally borrow it. And I was supposed to pick him up from the airport that afternoon. Mm. And of course, I'm tied up with all of this going on. And my wife goes out to pick him up. And he's almost he's actually more sarcastic than I am. So she picks him up at the airport. And he gets in the car and says, what did Bryon do? Crash the airplane? Not knowing what was going on. So that was kind of a funny end of that. But so we land, and the DPE scrambles out of the plane, and I said, look, I have two questions for you. Are you okay? Did I pass? And he's like, yes and yes.
That was going to be my joke. Was like, was that enough to write it?
I only found out when I did my commercial, because the lore of this circulates through the DPEs that are local here, because the DPE is still around here, and he's a great guy. He's a great DPE, and in the DPE that I had that did my commercial said, we've talked about that within that group, and there are regs that I should not have passed. It should have been a discontinuance.
Oh, sure.
But the time had gone by too far, so that they're like, look, you're past any sort of issues at this point in time, so it's not a big deal. But I passed.
Couple observations and questions in the chat. One first, Brian Turner, just plain silly, said, "Wow, you really go hard on your check rides." But he had a serious question too. He said, "Did you know the prop broke before you landed, or was it only after you guys had dismounted and saw the damage that?"
So I had at least one or two conversations with my CFI when I was training, because I've always been like, what's it like when the engine goes out? That's kind of weird. And he told me, he said, look, here's the deal. Because he'd had 2 or 3 engine outs. And he said, the engine will stop. Your brain will go, nope, it's still spinning. I'm just not seeing it right. So I can tell you firsthand, I'm looking out the front of the airplane going, the light's just not shining on it correctly. It's still out there. And it wasn't until we landed that it was very clear what happened.
I wondered that as well. Like, obviously the vibration and things, but that could be a lot of stuff.
Sure.
And I feel like I've watched a couple internet videos where you can actually like see the prop depart, or like it's like people know because something stopped and they can tell, but it feels like it'd be a hard thing to figure out. A lot of attaboys in the chat too. Just people just saying nice work, good job. Trying to think, some people sharing some similar stories in the chat.
More people have lost prop blades?
Well, just have landed in fields. Bruno from Fly with Bruno, which I guess we're not supposed to talk about him. That's a dad joke. It's a Disney dad joke. He says, I always wondered why transponders don't have an emergency button like that Squawk 7700, like the radios do with 121.5. That's interesting. That might be $1 million idea.
I think the more current Garmin's, there's like a button sequence, like if you press and hold the home button for 5 seconds or something like that. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Have that type of feature. So I mean, there are some radios out there that have that function. I think this one I had when there was an ICOM.
That's actually a thing I wonder about a lot. Like a lot of this is a little bit of a rabbit hole. And by the way, thank you for sharing that story. It's an incredible story. But since Bruno is taking us down this path of like technology, like I often wonder, like we have like with transponder codes and stuff, and the way technology was, it makes sense to have the various 7 codes for emergencies. But now with everything like digital, I feel like it should just be like there should be a button that said lost radio, boop, and then it just tells them. Like,
I should clarify, the EC button was for 121.5. Right. Not for the transponder.
Yeah. I think that's why he was
the idea
commenting on it. Like the idea was well, if you can do that for a frequency, why not do that for the transponder codes? And I'm just saying, interestingly enough, I've wondered that recently too. It's like, instead of everyone having to try to remember, just hit a button. Now we got the technology, unless you're in your J3 Cub or whatever. And everyone's saying they agree with you, Bruno. ADSB should just report souls on board. Sure. Lots of ways to do that. Okay, so that's a pretty epic check ride. but you passed, and then you went and did more stuff with it. But after that, because you've continued, got back on the horse, which is awesome. I think some
I went
people
flying
maybe
the next
wouldn't.
weekend.
That's
In a
amazing.
Satabria that a buddy of mine like doing one wheels on going down the runway, and it's just sort of like, okay, well, whatever. Yep. So that's the shaft right there.
Oh yeah. This is the one that broke. That just like clean off.
It
gone.
just departed. Yeah. Yeah, and the nice part was I was super confident it wasn't anything that I did wrong or I missed on the pre-flight, because I had both the partner who was the MP and the DPE more or less observing me doing my pre-flight before we departed.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm pretty comfortable with things.
So after that, you switched planes.
Yeah, so I joined a club that has 3 different types of airplanes. It's a Piper Dakota, Piper Saratoga, and a Bonanza F-33. It's a long-standing club. They've been around almost 50 years or something like that. And, you know, it's a much better organization to fly with rather than a rental school, because they're a little bit more high-performing airplanes. This was my second time going to Oshkosh, and my first time camping, which, if you go to Oshkosh, camping is awesome. Mm-hmm. And that thing will carry everything in the kitchen sink. If it fits, it ships. Great Piper. I really, really like flying it.
Yeah, look at that.
Was, I think, the first year. Yeah, the skies are just amazing out there. And then, the airplanes and all that.
It's worth doing, especially since you can have to sleep in. Did you sleep in the museum that night?
This year, yeah, we did on Wednesday night during the tornadoes and hail and all that.
Because I think that was the night we met, and again, I apologize. Yep. I was like, the more we talk, the more I'm like, okay, no, I'm starting to like put that night back together. But I think that was my first night, and I like kind of went a little heavy. And then there was all this emergency of the wind and stuff, and a lot of people ended up like sleeping in the museum.
Yep.
Next to the
Well, Brian Turner,
airplanes in there.
He kept handing you beers. That was the problem.
Yeah, no, literally, I think that, yes. Yes. That's 100%
Every time
problem.
I turn around, Brian would be like, "You're low. Here you go."
Oh, man. Yeah. Don't tell
So
my
go back
wife
to
that.
the Spirit of St. Louis picture there. So I have an interesting story about that one. Remember, my dad was a pilot. Never, I flew with him, but I have no memory of it whatsoever. That Spirit of St. Louis was built for the 50th anniversary of Charles Lindbergh's sort of victory tour back across the United States. It hasn't flown in decades. Mm-hmm. But it was meant to do promotional type things for aviation and EAA and all that stuff. When the 50th anniversary for the Spirit of St. Louis, I was 9 or 10, I don't know, something like that. And I grew up my primary years in a little town, Ogallala, Nebraska. North Platte's 60 miles away, and North Platte was one of the stops that Charles Lindbergh's went through. That plane flew into North Platte in 1977.
Oh, cool.
And I saw it go through the airport. And the first time I went to Oshkosh, I saw the airplane, and I was sort of like, okay, that's really cool. And then on the way home, I was like, I think I've seen that fly. And I actually still have the poster from when we saw it fly in 1977. And then I went back in 2014 or something like that, and I stopped one of the docents that was working there, and I said, I've seen that airplane fly. And he looked at me like, no, you haven't. That hasn't flown in decades. And then I told him the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, look, I was 8 or 9 when this thing came through. And he was just like, I've worked here for 20 years, and I've never heard anybody tell me a story like that. So it's kind of, to me, that's sort of a special presentation at Oshkosh.
And that's also one that I never saw it fly, but I definitely not to age the whole thing, but I remember going to that specific installation, that exhibit in the museum, when my dad took me up there when I was a kid, and we would peer over the edge, right? Because the plane was cool, right? But we'd peer over the edge of that wooden rail or whatever, and you'd see the little model of Paris.
See the diorama of Paris.
Yeah, and then it's all made of Legos, and that was even more kind of fantastical to me as a kid.
Yep.
What? They built. So that's it's interesting because obviously it's pretty things move around in the EA museum a lot, right? They kind of get shifted around as the collection changes or as different things happen, but that and the Wright Flyer are just these pillars of the museum.
Yeah, you gotta have them.
Had my kids, been taking them to the museum a lot because we live pretty close, and first thing, right, my 6-year-old looking over whoa, trying to explain to her, and she immediately, because of a cartoon she watches, oh, the Eiffel Tower, just putting it all together, and I was like, this is cool. Okay, museums still work.
And after having spent a night in the museum, I can tell you the night in the museum doesn't really happen.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Nothing comes alive.
Well, that would be maybe a little scary.
Yeah.
If they started walking around. You might be hearing me clicking. There's a thing that you're working on now that I'm prepping the photos for. So while I get the photos ready for that, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about. So you've got kind of what everyone envisioned, right? The story when they envisioned light sport, I think, is kind of what you're living,
right.
You're personifying that, right? Okay, I'm going to start with the light sport. I'm going to get involved there. Okay, now I'm ready to level up a little bit. Boom, now I'm private pilot. All right, now I'm ready to level up a little bit. Boom, instrument. Well, now you're leveling up in a different way. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your Sling project. And I'll get the photos ready to show everyone your craftsmanship while you tee it up.
Sure. I'm always trying to figure out a better, less expensive way to fly as much as I can. And inherently, most all of the airplanes that are available right now are almost as old, if not older than I am, that are affordable. And, affordable. And when I left the club for a variety of reasons, and I went into another partnership with the 210, and I really thought that was kind of be it, because it's man, I'm flying a 210, and this thing carries 6 people, and it goes almost 200 knots. It's going to be amazing, but it's $200 an hour, so that gets kind of pricey after a while. And
it's a lot of hamburgers.
I was talking, yeah. Well, if I'm going to be a 100-hour-a-year pilot, now we're talking. What's that? $20,000 a year,
right?
And I don't have $20,000 that I can just say I'm going to blow this every year to go fly as much as I want to. And all the 210s are, well, the newest one was 86, but ours was 76, and it was a really bad experience all the way around. The partnership wasn't horrible. We bought it needing a new instrument panel. We took it in to get the instrument panel. The shop that did it basically treated us like the bottom side of a shoe. The plane was in for the panel for 10 months.
Oof.
When it came out from the shop, the AD for the swing spar was going on. So we owned it for 15 to 18 months, and I think it was flyable for 5. And the thing I learned about flying at the 5 months was to get proficient enough, I was just going to have to fly it a ton. And, mad respect to the guys that have 210s or things that are more powerful than that, because it takes a lot to stay ahead of that airplane. And then the maintenance and the fact that you have to pay an A&P and everything else that goes along with it. It got to a point where it's like, okay, this just isn't going to work well. In 2018, I was at Oshkosh with a buddy of mine, and he was like, you really need to take a look at this airplane. And for those of you that have been on Oshkosh, there's a lot of airplanes to look at. So you just kind of look at one, go, look at one. You just keep going. So he dragged me back to this plane, and we spent 2 hours looking over the Sling TSI. And it was brand new. As far as I know, they just started selling it that year.
Sure.
I've since learned they've had the Sling 4 and the Sling 2, and there's a whole bunch of history behind the company and things like that.
A lot of world rounding.
They've got two or three of them have gone around the world, which is really interesting because there's more people that have been to space than have flown a single engine airplane around the world, which to me is just crazy.
That is my wife asked me once what I couldn't remember the photo. I was like, oh, I think I have a photo of you at the plane with the plane at Oshkosh, but no, it's a plane. It's just you next to a full. So people know what we're talking about. That's
right,
the
right.
Sling.
That's the demo. The demo Sling that they fly out of Torrance.
But the world rounding thing, just real quick. That is a SuperAero episode. I gotta do is I gotta actually fly around the world. It seems intense. I think I'd fall asleep. It's a shorter list.
So
you can't buy your thing on a rocket. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the guys that started Sling, they've got about a 50 minute documentary out there on their first around the world trip. And when you watch it, I'm like, okay, 3 points in time through the video, they should have, kid you not, they should have died. The very first one was they finished the airplane just enough time to depart to get to Oshkosh. They hadn't really done any testing. It was just sort of like, okay, let's go. They put everything in the airplane, took off. They needed instrument ratings to go through certain airspace in Africa. They both got theirs within either the last 24 hours or a week ago. And then they had an overnight flight through Africa, and they were going to take shifts staying awake to fly the make sure the airplane flew correctly. Well, we know how that's going to go. Look, I'm just going to close my eyes just for a minute, and then I'll open them back up, and then they both wake up. Well, the problem was the autopilot had failed, and it was in this spiral heading down, and they woke up to that. So that's died number one. And then they crossed the Atlantic from Central Africa the long way across over to Brazil. They were in the air for 20 hours. It was just, you guys are crazy. So the endurance on the airplanes were really, really good.
That's a good segue back to the airplane. That was good. Yeah. So the endurance is really good.
Yeah. So I kind of have this weird rule that I don't want to buy an airplane that I haven't flown, or I certainly don't want to build an airplane that I haven't flown. And I'd seen it. I knew what I was looking at. And again, this is a partnership. I mean, my wife is part of this journey, and I'm not going to spend the money and time building an airplane that she's not going to like. So COVID hits, and it's sort of like, gosh, I could be building something. And so we made a quick trip out to Torrance, California, and took a flight out to Catalina Island in this plane. And if anybody is interested in this plane, it's worth the trip just to go out and do a flight with Jean. He's a hoot, and that plane is out at Catalina all the time, to the point where it's like there's a landing fee at Catalina, and he just lands, parks, walks up to the tower, and says, "Okay, this is we're back," and they've got like an annual pass or something. So, and it flies just amazing. One of my concerns living at high altitude, flying out of a high altitude airport, is it needs to have good climb performance, and it can't really wane as you climb. And we took off out of Torrance. Granted, it's almost sea level, and we hit 7,500 feet, and it was still like not even slowing down. We were 1,000 feet per minute. There's 3 of us in the airplane. So I don't have any doubts about the performance at all. I got a buddy of mine who lives in the Denver metro area here, and he just finished his 40 hours on his TSI. And, everything he tells me is it's just amazing. I'm a few weeks away from being able to go for a ride with him. So that just kind of sold the deal. I wrote a check and put myself in line, and 10 months later, the kit arrives here at the house. It showed up here about 2 or 3 weeks before Oshkosh, and that was enough time for us to go through and do inventory. All of those boxes are now gone, because I've either assembled all the parts or I'm very close to completing all of that. There's more boxes that literally yesterday I got the bill of lading that it's coming. So I've got the canopy and the finishing kit, and all of that stuff's on its way. Inventory took us 2 to 3 weeks of just
no
counting.
kidding. I always wondered about that. I'm going to interrupt you for a second because I don't want to miss it. James Hyatt, thank you very much as well to you. And he has a question. He wants to know, I like the Sling, but how roomy are they?
One thing for my wife really liked is when she's sitting in the back, she can stand straight up the way the canopy works. The plane is inchwise as wide as a Diamond DA-40. But I feel like it's more roomy than what the DA-40 feels like. I've been in a DA-40 once, and it felt really cramped. Flying in the TSI, it felt really roomy. And I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. I
was going to say, you're tall.
Right.
Based on the photos I've seen of you. All right. I don't have these in any particularly good order.
Yeah, so you can just flip through them.
But we can flip through. The building experience.
That's the spoiler picture.
This is the spoiler picture?
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, well, shoot.
That's okay. No, that's fine. You can put it back up there. So what that is that's the main spar, and just behind it on the table is all of the structure for the center portion of the fuselage. I just put that together on Sunday. You can see on the back wall, I've got all of the parts hanging there so I can quickly identify things. Hanging in the back on the left-hand side, you can see all the little ovals. That's going to be the rear spar section, and then that kind of weird shaped thing that has all the holes around that. That's the jig for the ribs in the rear fuselage. It's just a good place to hang it.
Got it. Speaking
That's
of
the rear
fuselage.
Yep.
I wonder if we're going in reverse now as I go
yeah,
from
we
the
might,
back.
Yeah, we might be. We're taking apart the plane.
Well, that's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
When you were talking to us on the Zoom chat a little bit, you were talking about why you chose the Sling, and we talked a little bit about performance and stuff, but did any of the assembly and manufacturing that you're doing on your own weigh into that in terms of that versus other kits?
Sure. The build time on the Sling TSI is about, I think, 400 or 500 hours less than what the RV-10 is. When you're getting into the experimental and four-seat airplanes, there's not much out there, at least that's human affordable. You can do a Lancer or the Mako or a Velocity or something like that. I mean, those are really nice airplanes, but you're starting to talk about $350,000, $450,000, $550,000. The RV-10 is a buck rivet as opposed to pulled rivet.
Sure.
My neighbors really appreciate the pulled rivet because the noise the pulled rivet makes is just sort of like as opposed to, well, get a hammer and bang on something metal for a while. It takes two people to do the buck rivet. Most times, if you're building something that you've got to reach around, this is just as simple as, okay, you line the holes up, you cleco it together, you put the rivet in, you pull. So it goes very, very quickly. It's like the flaps and ailerons. Certainly I consulted the instructions, but it was so simple to look at. It's like, okay, well, these only go in this order. The rivet holes are set up in a way where this rib will only work here. And if you're putting something together where the rivets don't line up, it's probably wrong. So you just kind of fiddle with it a little bit. I think I put both sets of flaps and both ailerons together in 2 nights. It was really super simple. And I look at the instructions, make sure it's like, well, maybe I did something wrong because I went so fast. But no, it just kind of went together. So what you're looking at there is the part closest to it is where the fuel tank fits up to on the leading edge. And then from there on out, it's going to be the rest of the leading edge of the wing and then the landing and taxi lights at the very end. It's still on the jig for squaring up the wing at this point in time. But the next step, once you get this part on, you put the wingtip on.
Which is what, we are looking at the photos in reverse. There it is.
Yeah, so that's the wingtip there. Yeah.
I gotta say, one of the little style point things I like about the Sling TSI is the little like mini winglet thing. It's kind of nice. It's kind of a nice thing.
The swoosh.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, if you had advice for someone, it's interesting because when you walked us through the project and you were even showing us in the Zoom, you were showing us like plans and how they work together and stuff. And what's interesting to me about this, and first of all, we've had a ton of home builders on the show, and we've had Vans Aircraft on the show. We've had a lot of people on the show. I don't know, maybe it's just the way you explained it was slightly different, or maybe it's the foundation of all that. Like we've had Plane Lady, she's in the chat right now with building her RV-10. Sure. Every time I talk to you guys, it feels more doable than I think. But for some reason, and part of the reason I wanted to have you on the show is when we were talking about it the other night, even though and we don't need to get into the details, we were working through like, there's going to be snags along the way, manufacturing thing. It's not all a bed of roses, right? It's a hard thing. If it was easy, everyone would do it. Even in the context of those challenges that you were talking, and all the builders in the Patreon were commiserating about like, oh, this sucks to do, and this.
And that was very helpful.
Like I was like, oh man, like maybe I could do it, right? Like, and something about it, I don't know if it was just, maybe you guys are just wearing me down. I don't know. It seems every time I talk to you guys more, it seems more doable. And this kit, like my unofficial, like outsider opinion, is it feels way more doable than I think. Maybe, I don't know if it's just because we've dug in more. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, when I take on projects like this, I get pretty dedicated to them. I've finished 3 basements in my adult life, and that's been literally from the concrete studs and the concrete floor. I'm sorry, concrete walls and the concrete floor. And I get people to come over and look at it and be like, "Oh, this is what you do for a living." It's like, no, it's just I can read instructions and I have concepts on building things. I'm pretty well convinced that if somebody puts their mind to it, something like this is totally doable. I'm always very fascinated by what causes people to not finish these types of process. There's a gentleman who built a Sling 4, and I thought it was really fascinating because he had everything working in his favor to be able to complete it. Mechanically inclined, he had the space, he didn't make any excuses like kids or family or anything like that. But after 5 years, he finally threw in the towel and had somebody finish it up for him. So I think that those are interesting sort of case studies as to, okay, well, so what was causing you to be able not be able to finish this? And, I can kind of see glimpses of that as I'm going along. Honestly, the last 2 or 3 weeks, especially with the fuel tanks, and then, I had a part that was incorrect. And I felt like I got hung up in the process and just sort of stalled out, so to speak, for an airplane.
Sure.
So, but this last weekend, I got back out in the shop. It was a reasonably nice weekend. And I set aside the things that, okay, I've worked up to a certain point with these items. I can't do anything about moving them forward right now. But let me work forward on the things that I can. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I made this huge breakthrough. So now it's just sort of like, okay, well, these huge hurdles all of a sudden are little hurdles. And I can keep moving forward with the things that I've got going on right now. I was a little concerned with the finishing kit and the canopy and all that stuff showing up in the next week or so. But now it's like, come on, bring it on. So
there's some people are making fun of me in the chat. They're like, "Oh, now this is the plane of the week for you, Ryan." Some questions and observations. I'll do the observations first, and we're running a little bit longer tonight, but I hope that's okay with everyone because we had a lot.
Yeah.
You've got so many cool stories. 782 Papa, who's scratch building a biplane right now. He says, my favorite saying is you're building an airplane to go get a hamburger, not to fly to the moon. It's not that complicated. And that's really interesting. Chicken Bridge, which is the best. Well, maybe it's the second. I show a lot of preference to Scarface in the chat, but Chicken Bridge, that's an awesome username, says, maybe I could do it. Seems like a fitting slogan for civil aviators. A couple of tactical questions that are coming up. I don't know where it was. Was it Mike? Mike. Oh, Mike. That's I think maybe a long Polish name, so I should know how to pronounce it. But Mike K. Sorry, I took the easy way out on that. Wants to know, Bryon, did you have to bend the metal, or does it all come preformed?
This is probably the mother of all IKEA sets. There's one part that I'm aware of that you have to bend, and it's the luggage door. Everything else, the leading edges, the curves in the fuselage, it's all bent for you. So, and it might not be like a glove fit. It might be more like, you put it on and then Cleco it in, and then it fits perfectly. But yeah, I mean, there's it's not like I've got to go out and buy a metal brake or a roller or something like that. It's pretty straightforward.
Do all Sling TSI owners, when they're at Oshkosh, go look at that luggage door to see who did?
It doesn't look. I literally just was looking at that the other day, and it doesn't look bad at all. It's like measure 3 inches down and give it a little bend, and then you put it up into the fuselage and check for fit, and you just kind of keep doing that until you get it just perfect.
Finessed it in. Marin wants to know, do you have to buy the Clecos, or are they separate?
Oh, yes.
I think they're responding to this. This is a really cool photo, by the way.
Thanks. when you buy the kit, or when you get ready to buy the kit, there's like, here's this guide of all the tools that you're going to need and how much you're going to need of all these different pieces. I bought all the Clecos that were on the list and then found out that, yeah, I needed to double that. Mostly because I'm building as far as I can with a particular section. And then if I can't get any further with that, well, okay, now the Clecos are tied up with that. I can't take it apart to get those Clecos back. So if I want to build forward in something else, I've got to go get more Clecos. So I've got lots and lots of Clecos.
So,
That's
fair.
That's the pedo attachment. And the hard part about that is it's like the first time I'll find out if it's done right is when it's on the airplane.
By the way, Mike informs me it's Koselniak, which I should have been able to figure out.
Actually, I know Mike.
That. Oh, you do? You know Mike, and you didn't help me out at all, Bryon?
Oh, you think I can say it?
Looks like wing stuff. So this is just for folks who maybe, because I'm learning through you guys, like sure. that texture of the rivets there is one of the defining differences between the pulled rivets and the bucked rivets, right? Because they're
right. And one of the steps a little bit further on, I'm not to that point yet, is there's a filler that goes in where those little dimples are at. So yeah, it's a lot of extra work, but I think if we just set up an assembly line and we'll just bang it out.
And I'm waiting for one of the
something like that.
RV10 builders to be like, you could have just banged it out from the beginning with the bucked rivets. So, as you're
that's with the fuel tank on there.
I wanted to ask you sorry, let me go back to it. If you're what percentage? I know everyone hates that question, but where would you say you're at in the process so far?
What's the rule? You're 90% done and 10% to go all the time.
90% done, 90% to go.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. The funny part is when I started this process, I was like, I am going to keep accurate logs of all of the time that I put in, and I'm going to do all of these things that, I can tell within an hour of everything that I've been doing. That lasted one day. Most of what I do right now is sort of like, I think I worked 8 hours on it in the last 3 days or something like that. I'm pretty close. I think I'm pretty close in the time. I do want to give a shout out to my neighbors. For those of you that are looking at this, I'm building this in my garage. This is actually my next door neighbor's garage. I thought it was kind of a funny experience because they're relatively new neighbors. They're great people. They're wonderful new neighbors, and they knew I was building a plane, and they came up to me one day and said, "Are you mad at us?" And I'm like, "No, why?" "Well, because you're not storing your airplane in our garage." Okay. They only have one car in their garage, and we only have one car. But interestingly enough, we have another neighbor, and this is where it's a real community project. One of our neighbors is snowbirds, not these neighbors, but a different set of neighbors. And we're parking our truck in the snowbirds garage during the winter. So we've got the wing and control services all in my next door neighbor's garage. My father-in-law lives just down the alley. It's a common townhome shared alley. And that's where other things that don't fit in the next door neighbor's garage or our garage are going at this point in time. So we've been very, very fortunate from that perspective because it does take a lot of extra space. But before you think, oh, I've got to have this huge amount of space to build this, there is a guy in England who built a TSI all by himself, and I kid you not, it's like a regular garden shed that you go down to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy. He had just enough room to squeak around the edge of the wing when he was building it. and to me, it was just amazing that he did it. And he's got first flight at this point too.
Yeah, that's my big concern is where would I ever build something like I would have to like build a extra garage or something based on how tightly packed we are right now, but that's a good lesson.
Well, that's the opportunity to get light.
There you go.
So that's the horizontal stabilizer and elevator all kind of laid out for the first time there. And my wife, I do have to give a shout out to Plane Lady because she's an inspiration for my wife. My wife was very much like, oh, I want to be one of those wives that's out there helping, and she is. So she gets out and pulls rivets and helps put things together.
That's so cool. So it's a little bit of a family project now. That's awesome. I don't want to keep us too much later, but I wanted to ask two more questions. And well,
Sure.
There's three questions. First, people, we're never going to get out of here. The first one is you're documenting this on YouTube. You have a YouTube channel.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk about that for a second.
Sure.
Just what people can, where they can find you and what.
Yeah. FirstRivet.net is the blog location. The YouTube video makes it back there. There's pictures on the blog site, and then there's the written documentation of kind of where I'm at. That seems the trend is everybody wants to watch the YouTube. So if you want to, I love subscribers over there. If anything, just because that's the cool and hip thing to do.
Smash that like button.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've never been like that, but yeah, subscribe. But FirstRivet.net is where I'm there. EA also has a location where you can put build information in, and it also allows you to do things like costs and time and things, kind of supporting the things that the EAA typically looks at. At the end of the day, this is what's the interesting thing about building an airplane. What counts is when you do the final inspection, and you just need some pictures to kind of prove that you've done this. And that's it. When I first started this process, I'm like, oh, there's got to be a logbook, and because we log everything. There's an engine log, there's an airframe log, there's a pilot's log. Nope. You build an airplane, it's like, here's some pictures, I did this, good to go. And the documenting with the pictures has actually helped me out because I've been able to go back and say, okay, well, what happened at this phase? So, yeah, I mean, if you want to read the written part, FirstRivet.net, if you subscribe over and just First Rivet on YouTube. The idea behind the name is, how do you start such a large project like this? Well, you pull the first rivet.
Yeah, it's the home building equivalent of how do you eat an elephant?
Yep. That's exactly the same concept.
Brendan D in the chat says, I've been following the channel for a few months. Build is looking really great. If it looks good, it flies good, probably applies.
Gotta hope so.
If you had, I mean, we joked about 90% done, 90% to go, but if you had, where you're at now, if you had a piece of advice to give someone who's going to follow in your footsteps, what would it be?
Well, if you're interested in building, the wait times are getting really bad right now, and it's not Sling, it's everybody. I mean, I think Vans is quoting 12 to 18 months for some of their builds. The things that I would recommend is, make sure you get the money set aside for it. Murphy tends to move in when you get involved with big projects like this. And getting the funds, you can't go down to the bank and say, hey, I want to build an airplane, give me some money. So I started spending some time kind of amassing some funds for that. clear everything else out of your life that is a distraction. Because the more distractions you have, the easier it is to not go out and keep busy. So I mean, I've got certain things that are in my life that are they're ongoing, and I have to be involved with. It's for me to step out of it, it'd be difficult. But I've communicated with them over months that this is a priority. I'm available to help here, but it's not going to be much. And when I get to the other side of this, in theory, then I'll be able to commit back more to that. But you just have to really bring focus to your life in that area.
Yeah, it's too easy to spend a night doom scrolling on TikTok and then not get any get any work.
Yeah. We were having a conversation with some friends the other night, and they were talking about this TV show or that TV show that's really cool to watch. And I mean, that's great. But, if you're sitting around watching TV every night, well, that's great. But at the end of the day, I might have an airplane that I'll have built that I can go anywhere with. And it's our airplane. And, I might not never set foot back in the major airport.
Right. I would encourage people to watch a little bit of TV, because the
YouTube.
commercial, well, YouTube too, but the commercials in between, that's how I make my living. So just watch enough TV so I can maybe do this someday. No, that's good advice. I mean, yeah, you got to find, it's interesting, right? Like, this is going to sound naive, but I think it took me a long time to realize that, those of us in aviation or like aviation adjacent, like we have a certain amount of privilege that allows us to participate in this. Right. We talked about the money or whatever. And with that, then there's this weird shift that happened in my life as I got older, where the most valuable or the most scarce resource in my life wasn't money, it was time. Like, right. Now I'm middle-aged and I'm stacking up that list of like, I'm going to run out of time to do all the things I want to do. And that was an interesting mindset shift. And I think part of that is what you just said, right? Like being really judicious and purposeful with your time. And if you're not, like, it's not like, I don't know, like 2 nights ago, spent way too much time on TikTok that night. I didn't get an editing done. It's fine, right? Like that's going to happen, but like trying to like be judicious or purposeful with your time expenditure feels important.
Right.
Sorry, we get super philosophical. I mean,
if you're happy sitting and watching TV programs and staying current on all that stuff, good job. But to me, there's a certain amount of just getting out in the world that I want to do. And the plane is the vehicle to do that.
Yeah. Ty Russell says, SuperAero, stop with these live streams. I need to build a plane. Okay.
So weeks leading up to this, I would have SuperAero running on the TV in the garage while I'm building. So
that's a great honor. I consider that a great honor. Okay. We got to let Ty get back to his build. We've gone a little over, but I wanted to make sure we gave this enough time to talk about it. Can we play a game real quick?
Sure.
So you know this, but just in case anyone's new in the chat, Wall-E is in the chat. I don't know. Are you really the robot from the Pixar movie? If you're Wall-E and you're new in the chat, the short final is a game where we put a minute on the clock, play some epic music. I ask a bunch of quick questions. Brian's going to give us a bunch of quick answers. No points. He won or lost. It's his decision. It's up to him, whatever he wants it to be. And we'll kick this up here. Let me just hit the buttons. Oh, wait. Let's reset that because I did not get the music started.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I can't do it.
Oh, and now music. I can't clip. There we go. Wow. Redo that. Live television, folks. All right, Brian. Why can't I hit that button? Here we go. All right, short final. First, track up, north up on the GPS.
I'm not a heathen. I'm Northup.
You've landed at a lot of amazing airports, it sounds like. What's your favorite airport you've ever landed at?
So far, I think it's Los Alamos. It's very much like an aircraft carrier.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What about favorite passenger you've had?
My wife.
You guys have gone everywhere together, it sounds like.
We go as much as we can.
What about... we haven't talked about, like, warplanes or warbirds, though. You have a favorite warbird?
Almost anything radial, but P-38s and P-51s.
P-38. No one talks about the P-38 anymore.
They're awesome.
Angle of attack just showed up in the chat just for the end. Hey, what's up, Chris? Dude, Bryon, that was a fun show, and we went on an adventure together, and I think what's really cool to me is to see your growth as a pilot. Like, you're experiencing all these different chunks, right? Never mind your eventful check ride, but like you're growing, and this path is really interesting. What's next after the Sling?
My intention at this point in time is to get my CFI and be kind of a fun retirement job. It's either that or I'm really enjoying building it. I might just start building those.
There you go.
Yeah. I want to do some long cross-country trips. The East Coast, New York, definitely flying the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, and I think without risk of extending the episode longer, like that's, as you and I have nerded out via text, right? Like that's the other draw, right? Is you're gonna have like a very fast, fuel efficient aircraft.
Go somewhere plane.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, dude, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you to all the friends who threw in the super chats and everything. That's so awesome. It helps support the show. If you have hung on for an hour and a half of us nerding out about airplanes, we've talked about an engine a prop failure on a check ride, all the way to building a plane in your garage and your neighbor's garages. If you're still here, you gotta subscribe, because we do this every week, just about, and we nerd out every week as a little Sky fam. And you got to do that. You got to share it with everybody. And if you really dig it, join the Patreon, where we do Zoom. We're gonna do a Zoom chat after this. We all hang out and drink beer or age appropriate beverages and talk about airplanes some more. So and you could get a cool patch, not in a cup. This is my daughter's gave me this. You could get this patch too. That's a thing. Anyway, a lot of cool people supporting the channel, and I really appreciate that. Everyone else that's not going to stay up till 2 a.m. talking airplanes should go to bed now. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks again, Bryon.
Yep, thanks.
We'll see you guys.